In the words of an ancient Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And oftentimes, I've noticed that that first step can feel the most overwhelming. Let me take you all the way back to the summer of 2003. I was on the cusp of what I predicted would be an incredible 8th grade year. There was a slab of concrete in front of our garage with a faded basketball hoop cemented into the grass, and I would spend hours out there shooting hoops, meticulously following the handwritten workout I had taped to the garage door as if I had a personal trainer in the front yard that would berate me if I messed around. And every day before I went in, I would shoot from the edge of the concrete and promise myself, if I make this next one, I'm going to the WNBA. And if I missed it, then that one didn't count. Playing sports in college was my ultimate dream as a kid. I lived and breathed basketball and volleyball through high school, but the closer I got to graduation, the more I realized I had no idea how to get an athletic scholarship. I didn't even know where to start. I was from a small town with no college exposure. No one in my family had ever played college ball, and neither had any of my friends. This had been my dream for as long as I could remember, and it felt like it was abruptly coming to an end. If I wasn't an athlete, then who was I? After graduation, I took a year off and started nursing school. I felt defeated, and like I would never reach my goal of playing college ball. But then one summer evening, I was sitting on the bed upstairs when my phone rang. Not my cell phone. It was what used to be referred to as a home phone. I had a cell phone, but I didn't want anyone to know my number because I didn't want to risk someone texting me and exceeding my limit of 15 texts per month. I ran downstairs and grabbed the phone. It was the head volleyball coach for a college in eastern Montana. It had been a year since I graduated, and honestly, I had all but given up on ever playing college ball. But right then and there, sitting on the edge of my bed, they offered me a dual scholarship for basketball and volleyball. And I think I said yes before I even knew the name of the college. I often reflect back on that moment, and I'm in awe of how drastically our lives can change with just a single decision. Fast forward a few years, everything was going great. Perfect, actually. I was living my dream, doing exactly what I said I would do. But then on May 18th, 2011, after just completing my sophomore year of college, I found myself in the office of my former youth pastor with no one to turn to. He held the phone out to me, and before I had a chance to react, the person on the other line answered. 911, what's your emergency? I felt every ounce of oxygen completely disappear from my body. I was completely unprepared to accept the reality of the words that were coming out of my mouth. The only thing I remember from the phone call that day was the police urging me to tell my parents so they could be a support through the legal process ahead. Overwhelming panic instantly replaced the shame I'd been feeling just moments before. That was the last thing I wanted to do. In some ways, I think my parents' reaction felt more traumatizing than the actual situation. Our house was a remodeled garage, and the living room was just wide enough to leave a walkway between the couch and the single armchair where my dad always sat. And I avoided serious conversations with my parents at all costs. And this one went just about as well as I anticipated it would. There's really no good way to start a conversation like that. My coach raped me. The words blurted out of my mouth before I had a chance to stop them. I remember looking over at my mom, staring blankly at the carpet. She shook her head and, after a while, said, "Why on earth would you tell the police? That's going to be way too much trouble." The look of disappointment on her face is something I'll never forget. I was raped, but somehow I felt like the one who did something wrong. Like I was somehow a failure. The shame I felt about what had happened with my coach was now amplified by the shame I felt for speaking up. I was standing in my dorm room the last time the detective called. I don't remember her exact words. All I knew was there would be no justice, because there would be no case. And those little girls he coached on the side to help out the community, well, they would still trust him, just like he wanted them to. One might think rock bottom was being raped by my coach, but it wasn't. For me, rock bottom was being raped and then learning that he would be able to continue coaching and hurting other athletes, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. I wish I could say that day was a turning point for me, but it wasn't. In fact, it was quite literally the opposite. Nothing curbed the anger and the anxiety I felt. No matter how hard I tried to forget and move on, my body still felt like a rubber band about to snap. I hated myself for letting him ruin the sport I loved so much, for letting him ruin me. Peter Levine once said, "The paradox of trauma is that it has both the power to destroy and the power to transform and resurrect." What felt like the end of my story was really a new beginning. It was my therapist that ultimately connected me with an organization called the Army of Survivors. And I was drawn to the relentless dedication to changing our society through advocacy, education, and resources, all centered around changing the culture of sports and improving athlete safety. And in November 2022, 11 years after the sexual assault by my coach, I was humbled by the opportunity to join the Army of Survivors on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Advocating alongside countless athlete survivors is a moment I'll never forget. That athlete that felt so powerless and broken was now shoulder to shoulder with fellow survivors, sitting across the table from the senior advisor for the White House Gender Policy Council. Well, if I'm being completely honest, not only was I sitting across the table from her, I was sitting in what should have been her chair. And I spent the first few minutes of the meeting contemplating my entire existence, wondering if I could somehow slip under the table and pop up somewhere else. If it had been Arby's, or maybe even Applebee's, I think I could have gotten away with it. But in Washington, D.C., I can only assume that type of behavior might be frowned upon. But as each survivor spoke, I forgot about the formalities and the value I had assigned to her and her role, and I just spoke. She had reached what most would view as the pinnacle of success. But in that moment, we were just human beings, connected through our passion to end sexual abuse of athletes so that no one else will have to experience that pain, and so that the next generation of athletes won't grow up in a society where sexual violence continues to be minimized and overlooked. Research indicates that between 40 to 50% of athletes have experienced some form of abuse within sports, with 13% of these athletes reporting sexual abuse through their participation in sports. In the US alone, this equates to nearly 6 million children. And we speculate this number to be much higher, as this form of abuse is consistently underreported. With sports participation in the US currently as high as 21% of the population, the number of individuals impacted by this form of abuse is staggering, and the impact of this issue is affecting even the smallest of our communities. As children, we quickly learn what's safe and what's not. I knew at a very young age that to speak my truth was not only scary, it was dangerous. And throughout the course of my life, there have been countless experiences that have reinforced the belief that to be silent is safer. And I guess ultimately it might be. But sometimes what seems safe becomes the biggest barrier to our healing and the greatest barrier to the change we need to see in our communities and the world. Countless athletes have experienced sexual abuse, yet so many survivors feel unable to tell their stories. They are caught in the twilight of accomplishing their greatest achievement, while hiding their most painful secret. The intersection of sports and sexual abuse is unique in that the power dynamic between an athlete and a coach, the organization, and/or fellow athlete is often complicated by several factors. The current culture of sports has created the expectation that an athlete should never question a coach. And coaches often utilize grooming techniques with both the player and the caregiver to build trust, long before initiating inappropriate behavior. Sexual abuse is often coupled with physical and psychological abuse, which leaves the athlete feeling isolated and trapped. Reporting sexual abuse within a sports organization can lead to severe ramifications for an athlete. Athletes are often kicked off the team, lose their academic or sports scholarship, and in severe cases, even right here in the state of Nebraska, athletes have been forced by organizations to drop out of school as a result of reporting sexual abuse to their athletic organization. Without an established system of accountability and support, many athletes feel unable to speak up until well after the abuse has occurred. And strict statutes of limitations around reporting have left countless athletes without justice and allowed perpetrators to remain in positions where they are able to continue coaching and hurting other athletes. Shedding light on the power dynamic within sports is crucial so that our society no longer turns a blind eye to a problem that is devastating the lives of millions of people around the world. Shifting the culture of sports from one that embodies the just do it mantra to one that is trauma-informed and promotes athlete safety is a battle. But it's a battle worth fighting for yourselves, your children, and every child and young adult that is benefiting from the incredible lessons to be learned through participation in sports. Because everyone deserves to play the sport they love without the risk of abuse. With a global concern of this magnitude, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal." My life truly began to shift when I chose to use my voice to speak out against injustice. Change of this magnitude is overwhelming at times, but as we increase the level of awareness around this issue, we will change the system. Using our voice to speak up, something so simple, yet so powerful. Change is possible. And increased accountability for coaches and organizations is not only possible, it's vital. History has shown us that when people come together and speak up, cultures change, societies change. There is power in our intentional efforts to connect and stand up against injustice. Providing support to athlete survivors not only validates the individual, it opens up the opportunity for future action to be taken in creating a safer environment for athletes and holding organizations accountable for the development of a trauma-informed system. Change is hard. Healing isn't easy. Speaking up and advocating against something like sexual abuse is not popular or comfortable. But as I look back over my own healing journey, I can see that my moments of greatest discomfort were also the moments of my greatest internal victory, and the moments I made the most impact in this fight against sexual abuse. I am on a journey of embracing this type of discomfort, the kind of discomfort that brings out the best in us, the type of discomfort that causes us to grow and expand and use the tragedies in life to bring about change and healing in the lives of those around us. I am on a journey of redefining discomfort, and I invite you on that same journey, a journey of boldness and bravery. I challenge each of you to join me on this journey by sharing this message. If this talk moved you, please don't keep it to yourself. Connect with at least one person that needs to hear this, whether it's a friend, a colleague, or a family member, and share this message with them. Let's create a ripple effect together, because as we amplify these stories, we build awareness. And awareness is the first step towards change and transformation. Thank you.